that you're all doing very well tonight. And if not, I hope that this can help to relax you a little bit. I will be starting a brand new story tonight for your spooky bedtime stories. The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which was originally published in 1959. This book has its chapters divided into smaller chapters, so I think I'll be uploading each of those smaller chapters individually so that any of you who are actually following the story don't get too lost if you fall asleep. And I will get right into it. Chapter 1. No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years, and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone. Dr. John Montagu was a doctor of philosophy. He had taken his degree in anthropology, feeling obscurely that in this field he might come closest to his true vocation, the analysis of supernatural manifestations. He was scrupulous about the use of his title, because his investigations being so utterly unscientific, he hoped to borrow an air of respectability, even scholarly authority, from his education. It had cost him a good deal in money and pride, since he was not a begging man, to rent Hill House for 3 months. But he expected absolutely to be compensated for his pains by the sensation following upon the publication of his definitive work on the causes and effects of psychic disturbances in a house commonly known as haunted. He had been looking for an honestly haunted house all his life. When he heard of Hill House, he had been at first doubtful, then hopeful, then indefatigable. He was not the man to let go of Hill House once he had found it. Dr. Montagu's intentions with regard to Hill House derived from the methods of the intrepid 19th century ghost hunters. He was going to go and live in Hill House and see what happened there. It was his intention, at first, to follow seemed to him publicity seekers of subnormal intelligence, or unsuitable because of a clear tendency to take the center of the stage. He had a list of perhaps a dozen names. Each of these people, then, received a letter from Dr. Montagu, extending an invitation to spend all or part of a summer at a comfortable country house, old but perfectly equipped with plumbing, electricity, central heating, and clean mattresses. The purpose of their stay, the letters stated clearly, was to observe and explore the various unsavory stories which had been circulated about the house for most of its 80 years of existence. Dr. Montagu's letters did not say openly that Hill House was haunted, because Dr. Montagu was a man of science, and until he had actually experienced a psychic manifestation in Hill House, he would not trust his luck too far. Consequently, his letters had a certain ambiguous dignity calculated to catch at the imagination of a very special sort of reader. To his dozen letters, Dr. Montagu had 4 replies. The other 8 or so candidates, having presumably moved and left no forwarding address, or perhaps, possibly, having lost interest in the supernormal, or even, perhaps, never having existed at all. To the 4 who replied, Dr. Montagu wrote again, naming a specific day when the house would be officially regarded as ready for occupancy, and enclosing detailed directions for reaching it. Since, as he was forced to explain, information about finding the house was extremely